All right, from Georgia to Florida, where recovery efforts continue after Hurricane Milton battered that state. Floridians inch toward normalcy with power restored in most areas, gas stations back open, and students even heading back to school. But more work lies ahead. It's overwhelming as crews work to clean up fallen trees and just turn the lights back on for those still in the dark. And remember, Hurricane Milton hit just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene. So folks who live there who started to get their back up on their feet and rebuild their lives, now back at square one. In total, at least 268 people died from Milton and Hurricane Helene. Now, according to poweroutage.us, 200,000 customers still without power in Florida, 13,000 still in the dark in North Carolina. Now, to support recovery, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state will invest $9.5 million to help infrastructure repairs in that area. And in North Carolina, some communities only now getting a first look at the devastation from Hurricane Helene. In Chimney Rock, the town turned into a river, cutting off help for days. And earlier today, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper spoke about the misinformation and the recovery efforts there. Take a listen.
There's still a persistent and dangerous flow of misinformation about recovery efforts in Western North Carolina that can lead to threats and intimidation, breeds confusion, and demoralizes storm survivors and response workers alike. If you're participating in spreading this stuff, stop it. Whatever your aim is, the people you are really hurting are those in Western North Carolina who need help. The safety of our government and volunteer response workers, including FEMA, remains a top priority. I've directed the Department of Public Safety to coordinate law enforcement assistance for FEMA and other responders who need it to help ensure their safety and security so people can keep getting the help that they desperately need. We also know that there are many people looking for ways to help. We've activated the North Carolina Disaster Relief Fund managed by the United Way of North Carolina. Donations to this fund go directly to organizations providing relief on the ground. For more information and to make a donation, you can visit nc.gov/donate.
And that is North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper talking about how misinformation is really hurting the recovery efforts in that state. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis spoke just moments ago about the efforts to get the power back on for the thousands of folks still in the dark in that state. Take a listen.
First, just an update. So we've now had over 4 million accounts restored to power since Hurricane Milton came. That is the fastest that's ever been done for that many accounts. And so if you're even without power for a few hours, it could be a real pain in the rear end, but we had over 50,000 linemen. These folks really got to work. So you got about 170,000 accounts right now that are without power. Looks like a majority of those are TECO, but you also have some with FP&L and Duke. And you know, the co-ops, they got it done very quickly. And they didn't have as many as the investor-owned utilities, but they did a really good job, and they brought in a lot of people as well. So, and in terms of the impacted counties on power, every place except Hillsborough is under 10%, and most are. Pasco is now 3%, and I know you've got some TECO accounts, I think, in Pasco that they're working on. And Hillsborough is about 12%, and I know they have a very aggressive timeline for today. I think you're going to see a lot more progress, and so we really appreciate everybody that's worked hard on that. You know, there have been storms in other parts of the country that were a fraction of as significant as this. People were without power for weeks on end, and so here people really worked hard. So that's 4 million and counting. And I think those others, I know they're working really hard on it. We also have been able to see fuel really rushing into the state from Port of Tampa. Canaveral has doubled what they normally do to help backfill, and even Port Manatee, we got that back up and running. Not full capacity yet, but people thought that was going to be out for several weeks. So we're really, really happy to see that. Now, we know that is the key, because all the stuff with the way fuel is delivered It has nothing to do with the state of Florida. These are private markets, private companies. We are not Venezuela. You're not going to have the state government controlling, what gas station gets gas. I mean, that is done through the normal course. But we also knew as the ports were getting back to where they needed to be, as power still needed to be restored to some gas stations over the weekend, that we wanted to be able to do.
And you're listening to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis addressing the media there, commending crews for getting the power back on to 4 million customers and doing it relatively quickly. We should note, though, that a couple 100,000 people are still in the dark in Florida and thousands still in the dark in North Carolina, still recovering from these hurricanes, Jess. I mean, it's just you're seeing the destruction left behind these folks. I mean, we're talking about rebuilding their lives. It's not going to take months. It's going to take years in many cases, especially for some of these businesses.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about those businesses, and you go to Florida and sometimes you even recognize that. What is that damaged building over there? Oh, that was from 2000 blank, right? They fill in the blanks with those hurricanes that sweep throughout every year, and we're still 6 weeks away of that hurricane season wrapping up. Let's dive into the forecast real fast. The governor is actually out of Zephyr Hills, and Zephyr Hills received some of the most rain we've seen all throughout the state of Florida just from that Hurricane Milton that swept throughout the state into the overnight hours last week as a Category 3. Leaving the state of Florida as a Category 1 as it made its way out into the Atlantic. Now the tropics are relatively calm. And the reason why is we had this major cold front sweep in from the north in the overnight hours. This is impacting all of our East Coast with temperatures about 10 to 20 degrees below where we were earlier this week. And as that system continues to move its way to the south, it's going to suppress some of the active weather that we see down in the tropics, keeping us relatively calm for the time being. So here's what we're looking at right now. It's quiet for the most part, still some light thunderstorm activity inevitably in areas like the Keys, stretching all the way over into Cuba throughout this afternoon. Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, a similar trend. But when it comes to cyclonic activity, the rotation, we don't have a lot of activity inside. The National Hurricane Center, relatively calm right now. There's only one system well off into the east. It's this right here that has about a 30% chance of formation within the next 2 days. We'll continue to monitor that one very closely. Like I mentioned, we still are 6 weeks away from finishing hurricane season. I'll have more on that in a bit. For now, over to you, Liz.
All right, Jess, thanks so much.